Right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Leadership Ready Room Chats. I'm Brandon Jenks Jenkins, here with my co-host Tom Brother Murray, and it's been a few weeks, brother, since our last episode, and it had been a few weeks too since you and I had a chance to jump on a call and just catch up and talk about these topics that are so near and dear to us. And anyway, as usual, it brought up some really cool principles that are close to us, close to our hearts. And specifically the idea of when you're in a job or you're in a role and the learning, the growth, it seems to kind of stagnate. Maybe what was super challenging about the role before, really, it actually kind of drove you, and you looked forward to that learning and growth and development. And then all of a sudden, you've been in a role for a while and things kind of stagnate. You're doing well, you're successful by all measures, but that learning, that growth, those challenges, they don't quite seem to be the same. And so, I really enjoyed our discussion around that, and then also got to thinking about what the implications are for teams. And so, I'll throw it over to you, brother. Like, what's that bringing up for you, man?
Well, it's good to be back. I too have missed these chats. And as always, the way that we arrive at the topic is fun and personal. And yeah, so real quick aside here, we've also unlocked some technical solutions here that have plagued us for a few months. So I think I've got the contingency plan here for when the camera inevitably dies. Yeah, so this idea of what happens when the learning slows down, yeah, it's resonating for me right now. And maybe it's arrogant, maybe it's a midlife crisis, I don't know. But this idea that as you get more experienced with something, in some ways you become a little less engaged. And I'm not going to jump ahead yet, but as you were working the intro, a new thought popped into my head that we didn't cover yesterday, and I'm excited to share it with you as we get a little deeper into this. So, for me in my business, I'm a real estate broker. I run a real estate company, and yeah, I feel like I am a little less engaged in the day-to-day practice of what I'm doing. And I'm by no means an expert. I've only been doing this 3 years, and learning, I think, the pace of learning changes for everybody in every circumstance. I think, though, in a lot of cases, you wind up with some sort of exponential growth that gets you to, I don't know, 80 or 90%. I'm sure there's studies on it. My number's anecdotal. I think you get to 80 or 90% confidence. By no means an expert, but pretty comfortable in most scenarios. And I feel like I'm there. And it's going to take another, I don't know, 7 years to get to true expert status. And so, yeah, I think I do get a little restless. I do want to learn something new. And so there's a few ways to do it. So before I jump into maybe thoughts on a solution, if this is even a problem, I'll send it back to you to see what that's doing for you.
Yeah, man. One of my core values is just having a growth mindset, and what that means to me is just the idea that I can continue to learn and grow and develop, and I don't have to, just because I don't know how to do something, I'm not great at it. It doesn't mean that I shouldn't do it and that I'm a failure at it. It means that that's an opportunity to learn, develop, and grow. And it's especially as it applies to the things that I'm really interested in, right? And so that's a real core value of mine. And so what that means is if I happen to be in a role somewhere, wherever that is, whether it's a job where I work, it's the business that I run, or maybe it's with my family at home. if I'm in a situation where that kind of stops, or I feel stagnant, or I feel like I'm not learning, then I find myself looking for those opportunities. And typically I can find those um, somehow on my own, right? Sometimes it's harder than others to do that. But what really resonated with me is just the idea that if you're in a role where that kind of stopped, then that's a value of yours. It's you value that learning and growth, and you're in a role where you feel like that's not present. Then I think that we as humans, we're going to naturally look for that alignment with whatever value that is. In this case, the learning and development. And if we can't find it, I think we may start to feel restless. You know, like and you might not even know why at first if you're not super clear on what value it is that's kind of being assaulted or whatever. You may feel restless, you may not know why, and you may start to look for that alignment elsewhere, or maybe it's in the same company, somewhere else in the same company, or maybe you start looking outside that. I don't know, that's the initial thing that came up for me. I'm really interested in what your take is, brother. And then also, man, you got me intrigued when you said that you got something exciting to share.
Yeah, and it's not going to be anything new, Brandon. So let's temper expectations a bit here. But I think it's a connection that I just made that I'm excited to share. I similarly, Brandon, I do fancy myself a lifelong learner as well, and I'm always energized to learn something new. And and so this idea of starting a business and getting into real estate absolutely scratched an itch for me. Um, and not to get too far afield, but we talked about how sometimes these pursuits check one box, but maybe leave another box unchecked, right? We're learning something new. We're growing in a way that's meaningful to us, that addresses a passion or a core value, and then something else maybe stutters a little bit or is not progressing at the same pace. And at the end of the day, it's all a trade off. So but back to, more specific to the topic at hand, as I was starting to think back and map some of the current experiences I'm having, the last 2 or 3 years, to my last career, to our last career as Navy pilots, if I map what I'm doing now, I'm building something, I'm learning something, I'm becoming proficient at something. If you map that back to, naval aviation and growing up as a Navy pilot, there's a very natural transition that happens at about this point. Couple years as the learner, couple years growing, by no means an expert, but definitely very proficient. Well, the next thing is that you become an instructor. And I think for me, that transition in my former life allowed me to keep growing and to keep being passionate about what I was doing while still working on myself, while still honing my craft, and eventually, yeah, probably getting to expert status at the 15 or 20-year mark. But along the way, 10 or 15 of those years were as an instructor. Or shoot, even more than that, right? It's about 2 to 3 years in that you're really in an instructor role almost every day. And that kept me engaged, that kept me passionate, and I think it kept me on the growth profile or the growth trajectory that mattered to me, that kept me engaged in a meaningful way. And so as I think about my current venture, yeah, some of the day-to-day ho-hum maybe isn't as exciting anymore. But the thing that excites me most about what I'm doing today is training new agents, training a team that's going to go out and do this work. That, on any given day, if I have an opportunity to sit down with one of my agents and provide training, I still really enjoy that. And so that's the connection I made. Again, probably something that you're, anyway, I'll flip it back to you. How does that land for you? Do you feel similarly?
Well, dude, you brought up such a good point, because a lot of times I think that, especially in the professional world, I think that sometimes we believe, okay, continuing to learn means some kind of course, some kind of training, maybe go back to school, maybe get some kind of certification or designation. And it can mean that. I mean, that's part of it. What you just brought up is, man, it's such a good lesson that we can take from naval aviation. And I believe there are so many ways to apply that. I mean, you just gave an example of how to apply that outside of naval aviation in leadership and organizations. And you mentioned your brokerage. It's okay. How do we start to bake in the growth, the learning, the development, the continual learning and growth into what we're doing day to day? And your example is one example. Okay, you learn your craft and you get really proficient at it to a level where now you are trusted to help other people, train them, help bring them up to that proficient level. And the beauty of that, and it's actually a parallel I see with coaching and why I love coaching so much, brother, is while you're instructing and helping to teach somebody else, you inevitably along the way, I mean, like almost all the time, you're seeing little things that you're actually learning and you're becoming more proficient as you teach it. Perfect example with coaching is like when I'm coaching someone, I'm trying to help them kind of see which direction they need to take. And to do that, I just have to be really curious about them and where they're at and how they're processing things and what their perspective is. And I'll tell you what, most of the time, their perspective isn't the same as mine, right? But as a coach, like I set that aside as best I can. And I'm with them and I'm curious about, well, okay, well, that's interesting. Like, how is it that you came to see it that way? And so by doing that, I am learning as well, like helping that person kind of uncover what they need to do and get better themselves. I'm also learning a new perspective, a new way to look at things, maybe a new way to reach somebody, which can be incredibly helpful in all areas of life, right? When you're communicating and you learn new ways to reach people and to help communicate more effectively. So, dude, yeah, what a great segue, brother. Is that kind of where you were thinking this was going or what?
Not until 10 minutes ago. To your point, about the benefit to the instructor, to the coach. I think this is something that leaders should think about. And I think it's another, reason that coaching and mentoring and instructing and training, which I think all there's a Venn diagram with a ton of overlap there with all of those concepts. And I think that a leader, someone in a leadership or management position who has direct reports, one of the benefits to the leader to take on one or more of those roles, coach, mentor, trainer, instructor, one of the benefits to the leader is the reflection that is necessary to do those things well. Coach, mentor, lead, coach, mentor, train. That which goes right to the point you were making. You wind up becoming much more, I think, in touch with your own thoughts, your own values when you are forced, not forced, but when you have the opportunity to talk through those things with another person. And if it's a true instructor type role, man, how best to really achieve mastery of a subject than by teaching another, right? And so, geez, I can think back to dozens or hundreds of examples where I ended a flight and I was in an instructor role and I felt like I had learned more than the student, right? And how much that contributed to my own growth as a pilot and an instructor, I probably can't quantify it. It's so massive. So, yeah, what a cool way to develop yourself while developing others. And I think, even when you leave the cockpit, I can think of many examples as well where when I sat down to provide some mentorship or coaching to somebody on my team, the work that I did to get ready for that absolutely benefited me, right? And now when you start talking about organizational benefits, things, it's a snowball of positivity that just keeps building here. So I'll pause there. How does that all land with you?
Well, you're touching on something that's super, over the last 3 years, I really became interested in it. And a lot of it had to do with reflecting back on my time as a CO in the squadrons. And that is just a different way of looking at learning. And so I've already said it, right? One way is schooling. One way is certifications, designations. The other way is what we're talking about. And I think again, I'll reiterate, all of it's valuable and all of it plays together. Example, you go back to school, you learn some new principles, a new theory, and then you go back into the real world and you try to start figuring out how do you apply that theory when real world challenges and people are involved. And so that's one way you're using kind of schooling and blending it back into the real world there. Tom, what you and I are talking about and what is so applicable no matter who you are, what organization you're part of, what your team is like that you're leading, there are ways to engage each other in a type of learning cycle that will benefit them in their role, in their day-to-day role, in the context that they have to operate in. That's beneficial because they're actually doing the thing and then learning from the thing and figuring out how to make the thing better. And so, and that's really, really applicable to leaders and their organizations because it doesn't matter what the textbook says so much as it matters what are we learning in real time? How do we self-assess? How do we correct? How do we pivot? Or how do we make this better? How do we improve our results? It's very applicable. And I think that the way naval aviation really does a great job of this, I think. PBED, planning, briefing, executing, and debriefing, man. That is to me a learning organization practice. I don't know that I've ever heard any academic or anyone tell me that, yes, that definitely is. But to me, it's a cycle and it's a learning cycle, right? Like you mentioned it, the benefits of sitting down with your team and planning something, thinking through all the possible outcomes. What are all these assumptions we're making? How can we turn those into facts? All right. And then we get this plan and now we go execute. And of course, things change immediately, right? So plan it. Well, first you brief it, right? You brief the crew. So you rehearse it. So you know what it is and what's the benefit there, right? You can pivot because you know the plan. You have an idea of what's going to happen. So when you start to see things, it makes it actually easier for you to pivot if you need to. And that's the execution phase. And the whole time you're observing, you're learning, and then you come back and you debrief it. And you're looking for those lessons that did we think it was going to be like versus what was it actually like? And why is that? What was different than what we planned for? Could we have known that? Right? And that getting into some kind of cycle like that is incredibly good to train your team to be able to continue to learn and grow and assess and correct and all that. So I'll pause there real quick.
Well, I think you did a phenomenal job tying all that together, Brandon. And I think that not only do leaders need to appreciate this for themselves and the organization, I think it's something to watch out for. If you're in a leadership position and you have someone that's been on the team for a modicum of time and they're highly proficient, it's probably worth engaging them to find out how they're feeling. Are they still as engaged as they once were? And if they're not, well, that's an opportunity to maybe give them a chance to be an instructor in some way. And I realize that those are broad, generic terms that I'm using because it's going to apply differently to different sectors and organizations. But man, I think it is. And I again, to our shared experience in the Navy, we did that. When we got into leadership positions, we did. I'm sure you did the same thing. You probably saw somebody who was, they're just about highly proficient, not yet a full-blown instructor, and you gave them opportunities to push their limits a little bit, to put them in a slightly uncomfortable situation and watch their growth continue and often continue exponentially so from there. So I absolutely think if it's not baked into your culture or your organization's leadership development, it's something to consider because, I feel like I can speak for both of us. We've seen it work really well.
Yeah. And what's coming up for me is like the mindset, right? The leader, if you are the leader, then your mindset about this, about what we're talking about right now, plays such an enormous role in whether or not you're actually creating or helping to create a learning type environment where people do continue to learn and grow and feel challenged and know that that's a good thing. Um, it starts with, I think it starts with the leader's mindset. And what does that mean? That's just kind of your beliefs around it. Like if I have a perfect example, if you're listening to what Tom and I are saying right now, and you're just like, man, this doesn't make any sense. You just gotta, you got a thing to do. You just got to get really good at it. And you do it, and that's it. And as long as things ain't broke, don't fix them. Okay, that's a different mindset. And so you need to ask yourself, all right, well, what are the implications of that for me and my team for when things change, when things don't go quite as they always have? When you're in an environment, I don't know, like we are right now with AI and how the exponential growth of that and how that could potentially affect you and your sector, your industry, your job, your family, right? There's some things that are a lot different now than 10 years ago or 5 years ago or last year, for crying out loud. And so what are the implications if you don't have a mindset where you're looking to learn and grow and develop all the time? What are those implications for you and your team?
I mean, I love the tie-in to present day and the way things are evolving, Brandon. I think that um, just like the analogies back to naval aviation and the way we were learning and growing, these conversations help me learn and grow, right? Our time yesterday, reflecting, talking about things that are top of mind, and then coming it back the next day to talk in depth about one specific facet always helps me learn and grow, which I think is a total um, validation for this entire concept, right? Um, Man, I think we were very fortunate in the Navy, and I kind of poo-pooed this a little bit yesterday on our call, where there's these kind of defined tracks, right? There's a couple of tracks, and there's certainly permutations of them, but there's just a couple of tracks that a naval aviator is going to follow, A or B, or maybe there's a C in there too, for a career. And I poo-pooed it a little bit, and I stand by what I said. I'll also offer that there's a lot of positives to that, right? That whether it's the way that PBED, plan, brief, execute, debrief, the way that's baked into the culture, and the opportunities to progress from student to proficient aviator to instructor, the way that the system is set up to, I don't want to say force that, but give you opportunities to do that, absolutely contributes to our growth. And I'm thankful for it, right? It not only did it help me become an instructor, it helped me realize I was passionate about instructing. And now it gives us, an opportunity to apply these things to other opportunities we come across. So, yeah, very fortunate to have had those experiences. What another, I'm always amazed that, we wind up a little bit in a different spot than we might have intended or thought we were going to on these calls, and it's always for the best. So, yeah, I'll kick it back to you. I know we're getting short on time, so what's your final thoughts here?
Well, it's funny because the conversation yesterday, this part of it really, it was kind of like individual focused, like individual person focused, like me as Jenks. What do I feel about my opportunities for learning and development and growth right now? And dude, you said it, and it's kind of been a theme of today's call, like the synergy that you get when you move from just individual study to engaging with another person and the opportunities to learn from each other. And for those new perspectives to pop up, and then you make a connection. And dude, I was thinking a little bit about how this applied to the team. Like that was in the kind of the after our call and the prep that we did. That came up, of course, right? That's super relevant to leaders. However, the depth that we've gone in with the moving from the learner, from the trying to become proficient and expert to then instructing and teaching, and then how that connects to what's the principle at play there. The principle is, for me, that I took away is that how do we embed these types of things into the way that we do business? And then when that is embedded, now how do we then use that? Like it's like when you're riding a bike and you got a lot of RPMs, just little increases in the power result in big time speed changes because you've got all the RPMs, right? So it's like embedding PBED, for example, just because that's what we've been talking about, into the culture. Then as things change, you've got the wheels are turning and you can put it into a system like that. And it really helps you learn and pivot and adapt, right? And assess what's going on and adapt again. And dude, back to the point. It started out as just, sometimes it feels like we're stagnant, like there's nothing more to learn here. So we start to look for it, and look where it ended up. And that's just two people in a conversation. Imagine if we had two or three more of our peers, or maybe not even peers, but just two or three more people who are interested in this. What could we learn from each other? And I think that is for me, the big takeaway from this is just how do we continue to embed these types of things into the way we do business at home, at work, and how do we integrate the people aspect and make sure that we are learning from each other. I'll kind of pause there. Anything before we kind of close out, brother?
I can't do better than you just did, Jenks. Take us home.
Dude, well, yeah, I'm not gonna try. This one, as usual, was incredibly beneficial for me, and something we could talk about for a long time, I think. But for the listeners out there, thanks for joining us, whether it's live or after the fact. If this resonates with you, then you're in the right room. And Tom and I would love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out to us so we can continue the conversation. And we look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of Leadership Ready Room Chats.